As Europe fights over Britain's planned exit from the European Union, there's a very special case. Ireland. It's the only place where there will be a land border separating Britain from the European Union. We go to the Emerald Isle to explain how that's making a complicated issue even more so. Ian Marshall has worked his family dairy farm in Northern Ireland for more than 30 years. He's also a member of Parliament across the border in the Republic of Ireland, and he's strongly opposed to Brexit, the plan by Great Britain, including Northern Ireland, to exit the European Union. He worries that Brexit will change a critical feature, one that keeps the peace and allows so many businesses in Northern Ireland and Ireland to depend on one another. A near invisible border.
I keep making the point that sometimes you don't recognise what you've had until you lost it.
For 3 decades, this was the violent reality. Terrorists on both sides battled over British rule of Northern Ireland.
The Northern Ireland border town was another scene of violence in a black weekend. Demonstrators captured and burned 5 single-deck police buses and pushed another into a canal.
The border was a military zone. In 1998,
the smiles said it all.
The Good Friday Agreement brought peace, and the so-called hard border was dismantled. Today, crossing the border from Ireland into Northern Ireland is frankly less remarkable than crossing from one state to the other in the United States. There are no border crossings, there are no big signs. In fact, the method I'm using to tell for sure that we've crossed into Northern Ireland is by looking at it on this map, not by watching the road. And there we are. Welcome to Northern Ireland.
What we've got seamless, frictionless trade across the border. People move and travel backwards and forwards on a daily basis, and we've forgotten what the implications of having border checkpoints and controls were.
With Brexit, the Irish island will be split. Northern Ireland, part of Britain, will leave the European Union. The Republic of Ireland will remain in the EU. That will create a land border, the only land border between Britain and the European Union. The question is, will it hurt trade and lead to bloodshed?
When you put a customs guard, he becomes a target. So to protect him, you potentially need a policeman or a soldier. Lo and behold, by default, over a prolonged period of time, we end up with a border.
Thank you. Naomi Long, also a member of Parliament for Northern Ireland, agrees that trouble could be ahead. She leads Northern Ireland's Liberal Alliance Party.
Undoubtedly, there are those in terms of dissident Republican groups and indeed loyalist groups which have still not given up their violence, who would be quite content to restart trouble and to use the border as an excuse to do so. So that's not to say that it's the border issue that would cause the violence, but it would give them an excuse.
She argues that Northern Ireland shouldn't completely pull away from Ireland and the European Union with the rest of Britain, and the border here should remain open with no physical infrastructure.
Clearly, some kind of special arrangements are required for Northern Ireland.
Long's idea has plenty of support among those who oppose Brexit. Many still remember decades of political and religious divisions depicted in Northern Ireland's famous murals. In neighborhoods where terrorists were recruited for both Catholic and Protestant militias, the murals memorialized leaders of each side. This is the wall that the British started building in 1969 in Belfast, Northern Ireland, to keep the Protestants and the Catholics separated. Today it's called the Peace Wall. It's a tourist attraction and a reminder of what used to be and what some fear could happen again. On the other side, Brexit supporters like Nigel Dodd say opponents are evoking ghosts of Ireland's violent past for political reasons.
This is utter scaremongering, designed to try to prevent Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom actually leaving the European Union, because certain governments don't like that happening.
Dodds is a Conservative Party leader in Northern Ireland's parliament. He says the two Irish countries will not need a new so-called hard border after Brexit.
We already have a border for political purposes, for currency purposes, for tax purposes and everything else. The border, in terms of customs and single market, can be regulated without any hard checks at all.
There are some who say that's sort of an exaggerated controversy to simply push to have no Brexit deal.
Well, there are those who take that position, and I don't believe that any nation should make its decisions based on the threat of violence. That is a fundamental principle of a democracy. But I think it would be reckless of us to ignore the impact that border infrastructure would have.
While politicians debate, it's impossible to know what the Emerald Isle will look like after Brexit. But there's a strong desire to keep the violent past a subject for tour guides, not a political football used to rekindle old flames of dissent. Britain's Prime Minister Johnson has promised he will not put up a hard border on the Irish border, but Ireland's Prime Minister says hard checks could be needed.